a leader's highest ROI is getting to a place where your leaders can actually grow other leaders. There's such a multiplying effect of you no longer have to bear all the burdens of developing leaders. You're growing a business, like you can have growth or you can have comfort. You can't have both.
Everything that you do as a leader, and this could apply to your team as well, but you should be able to have at least 2 other people besides yourself that could take on any one of those tasks if needed, not all of them. So I might have 3 people that know how to do 3 things that I can do. And the key is...
Hello and welcome to IDD Leader, where each week I help you kick staff turnover to the curb and build the kind of workplace that attracts and retains the best people in human services. I'm your host, Nate Beers. Let's dive in. Well, here's an uplifting thought. If you got hit by a bus tomorrow, would your organization still function next week? And would it function nearly as well as it did before the whole bus thing? Listen, I'm not wishing ill on anybody, but that's a question that comes up with my guest today. I'm privileged to have on the podcast Wes and Kristy Mast. They are co-owners of a multi-state, wait for it, home inspection company. Wait, why are they on a human services podcast? Well, because as much as they care about home inspections, the thing they're most passionate about is developing people. And that, my dear listener friend, is one of the most crucial dilemmas or challenges facing us in human services is how can we keep building our leadership pipeline? How can we make sure that we're really developing our staff and our frontline supervisors and our managers, directors at every single level of the organization? Are people being invested in and developed? Because people who are being invested in and developed are so much less likely to leave or get burned out. And then, of course, how that affects the bottom line dollar and how it affects individual and client outcomes is remarkable. It's like night and day. Anyhow, one of the things we dive into is not only about the question about the bus and how to make sure that's happening in an organization that it can function without you, but we also look at the kind of how does that happen? Well, it goes beyond just developing a leader. It's developing leaders who can develop leaders. And they are going to share some valuable insights on that topic and the system that they use that keeps any single person from becoming a single point of failure and a whole bunch of other valuable lessons. So without further ado, let's dive in.
I want to get your guys' take on something. A lot of times what I've, observed, you could say, is that someone, like, they start to really get it. And maybe they're in maybe a mid-level manager position. They start to really get it with leadership. So now they're not just solving everybody's problems for them. They're not just letting everything, kind of clog up the pipeline. Like they know how to help the people that are on their team start to solve their own problems. But what I want to hear from you is what's your take on how can that person become a replicator of that? So that if that person went for now, they're not managing people on the front lines, but they're managing, or they're trying to actually, how can you get where your leaders are the ones developing the leaders, if that makes sense? It's not just your system. A system matters, absolutely. But that seems to be another point of friction is then they don't themselves own the problems. They are good at making sure the people that report to them do, but they haven't actually taught those people how to do that for the ones that report to them. Does that make sense?
Yes,
I'd love your take on it.
Yeah, and I mean that's been such an interesting journey for us and learning, like, as we started putting leaders in place, that, man, I don't want to say that not everybody can do it, because I think a lot of people have it in them, but it takes a lot of investment and intentionality to get to a place where one of your leaders can now grow other leaders. And I would say that is a leader's highest ROI, is getting to a place where your leaders can actually grow other leaders. There's such a multiplying effect of you no longer have to bear all the burdens of developing leaders. So I would say a couple things. I think just having your leaders know that different personalities show up differently, and not having to think that I need to replicate myself. I need to find somebody just like me. Working Genius is a huge resource. Patrick Lencioni, I love Patrick Lencioni. His whole set of books is just, it changed my world. And when it comes to people, for hiring, retention, all of it. But Working Genius and some other aspects, like we all think a leader has to be a certain way. It's a certain architect of a person, and but leaders aren't born. Like when a person's born, it's not like, oh, that guy's a leader right there, or that girl's a leader. It's, you're born and the leaders are grown. So how can you get better as a leader, growing other leaders? How can your organization get better at growing leaders? And we all can. And I think our leadership academy was a big thing for us, and crafting that is similar to hiring, Nate. Like every time you need to hire, it shouldn't be this, all the brakes stop and you all have to go back and learn how to hire again. And what are our interview questions and where do we post the job ads? Like there's a process for it. So when you're looking at leadership development, it's the same mindset. Okay, here's how we grow leaders. Here's how we train them to ask questions. Here's how we identify who's actually taking on more responsibility voluntarily, who seems to enjoy investing in the people, who seems to be natural at these things, and asking them the right questions. And you start building a funnel of leadership inside your organization. And you have to have this mindset of, we're always in the mindset of, we're always recruiting. We may not always be hiring, but we're always recruiting and looking for really good people. And then building a leadership bench and a leadership pipeline. If you're one leader away from a leadership crisis and you have nobody on the bench, you are setting your whole organization up for pain, not just yourself, but your whole team.
Yeah.
So you are not doing your due diligence as a leader, as a business owner, whatever that looks like, by only having one person, or one person in your company, or one person in a certain role where there's nobody else who can share responsibility. So there's a couple of tactical things we do, and Kristy's probably going to share on them, but a task matrix is one of them. Like we share responsibilities and we have names down. Who else can do this role in leadership? Who else can post a job ad? Who else has the access to this? Who else can make this call? And we lay out some of those things. So I'll hand it over to you now to talk for a while.
No, you're good. Yeah, he's referencing one of the things Wes and I do as both business owners, but we also really like our leaders to do this, is what we call a stress test. Nobody really likes their body to be under stress, but it's kind of to force some stress within your organization or your team. So what that looks like, and we like to start off with 2 weeks. And that's for, can Wes and I step away, or can one of our leaders step away for 2 weeks? What are the things that break? Now, what can't happen is you can't front load and back load. That's why we don't like doing a week. Because if you go on vacation for a week, that's what most of us will do, right? We'll put some extra meetings and stuff before we leave. And then when we get back, we're like, we have more work than before we left, because we just let things go on both ends. So that's why 1 week doesn't work. But 2 weeks, things have to continue to flow, right? So you can't just front load or back load things. And so we want to see, where are those stressors? Where does the company or the team feel it? So to help prevent them from feeling as much weight, or to help build up some of the strength there, the task metrics that Wes was referencing is everything that you do as a leader. And this could apply to your team as well. You create columns of what those tasks are. Now, maybe not one other person in your team or your organization can do all of them, but you should be able to have at least 2 other people besides yourself that could take on any one of those tasks if needed. Not all of them. So I might have 3 people that know how to do 3 things that I can do. And the key is that way, if I do need to step away for a period of time, I have 2 other people who can handle that task for me. And the reason we do 2 is because if one gets promoted or moves on or changes positions or leaves, I'm not back to it all being on me. And that's probably one of the biggest challenges we find, is they'll get that one other person, they get cross-trained. You have to have 2, because otherwise you're going to feel like, oh, great, I handed this off. And then something happens and you take it right back, and you hand it off and you take it right back. So we really work with our leaders to make sure that for every task that they do, there's 2 other people. And that means those people have access, they're trained, there's a Loom video or some sort of training video that they can reference, because they're not doing it all the time. And that really helps build teams and organizations and companies that can work through these stress tests And then the beautiful thing is with the stress test is you find new things, right? You find big and little things where you're like, okay, that's a bottleneck in our team or in our company. We need to figure out a system. But we, as often as leaders, we don't step away enough to even figure out what some of those bottlenecks are and or see who rises up, right? To even like, man, so-and-so was a really good problem solver while I was gone. Or they handled, X, Y, Z really well.
Some things are surprising with that too. Like one example, on one of our form submissions for the password, like my phone number was the authentication text message for it. So like we were gone, and they're like, "Shoot, we can't get this code." So like we needed to update that to like office number or email that multiple people had access to, and that was just, I mean, it was a really simple thing, but it was a bottleneck because if that login needed to authenticate, like it had to come to me. And like, that's silly. And some of them are bigger things like payroll, or when there's a really high escalation of maybe a top client or a top referral source, like who handles that? Like those can take a little more time, but they can definitely happen. I think one of the goals what Kristy's talking about is nobody should be irreplaceable inside the organization. Everybody should be replaceable. And we actually, as part of our coaching, and when when you are replaceable, you're actually promotable. A lot of people have a fear of, if I'm replaceable, I'm going to be replaced and I'm going to get fired. It's like, no, if you actually can replace yourself, that's a great skill to have. Now we can actually level you up, where we're delegating tasks and we're elevating you to a new level. But the hit by the bus theory is, if you got hit by a bus tomorrow, like business should still be able to happen. And that's true for anybody. Business should be able to flow without you. That's like our first step of bringing on people, of bringing on systems. Now we want the business to actually still flow when you're not there. That's the first goal of the stress test. The second goal of the stress test is to get to the place where the business can grow without you. And that's a powerful place to be, where without your direct involvement, the business can grow. That's where that multiplication starts to happen. And that's when leaders start to grow leaders, and growth can be exponential. So yeah, the hit by the bus theory, nobody should be irreplaceable inside the organization.
No, that's huge. I'd love to hear if you can think of a time when, as your company was growing, when you felt like you really had to protect the culture, that something started feeling like it was getting off course. And then what did you do? If if there's any times that come to mind.
Sure. I think it normally comes down to people. Like culture is your people and how your people are behaving. So I think the main things that really erode our culture, especially when we're growing fast, is we're not doing a good job of hiring. Like we've had that talk with our team, like, hey, we're really work on hiring. We have a intentionally slower hiring process than probably other companies do, because we know in 2-3 years from now, if you grow 25%, your organization is going to double in 3 years. So that doesn't sound like really rapid growth, but over time it adds up. And if you're hiring people that aren't a culture fit, your culture is going to change in a unintentionally bad way, because you're not bringing on the right people intentionally. And then tolerating incompetence, tolerating behavior that isn't a culture fit. Like what you tolerate, you allow. So if someone breaks your culture, breaks your core values in a big way, and you allow it, you've just said, I don't really care about our core values. I don't really care about our culture. So you don't have to be mean. You don't have to be harsh, but you can have a conversation and say, hey, we don't do that here. Like that may go somewhere else. I just want to make sure we're still aligned with this. You were hired based on these core values, based on this culture, based on this future vision, whatever it is. Like I want to make sure we're still in alignment. Okay, so we're going to agree we're not going to do that again. And every time, and I'm talking about meaningful ways, like big ways, not every time someone does a little something, we still want to address that. But when we have agreement on how we do things, like you have to protect the culture, and that means bringing on the right people, and it means making sure that people on your team are behaving the way and living out your culture. Because what our biggest motivator for us is, we want to show up to a workplace that we like. We want to enjoy coming to work. And if we hire people we don't enjoy coming to work with, that's not going to be enjoyable for us. We want a business that we love. And it doesn't mean that they all match our personalities and we're friends with everybody. Like, yeah, we want to enjoy being around them, but it also doesn't mean that I, I don't love calling our team a family because you don't fire family. And even if our family acts up, like we're not like, oh, you're fired from being my brother. Like maybe I don't talk to them as much, but I mean, I want to enjoy working with them. And it's also a different relationship. But I want to help invest in them and grow them and help them be the best they can be. And find every opportunity to do that. And when that's no longer a fit, it doesn't mean they're a bad person. You could fire somebody with dignity. You don't have to beat them up on the way out. But if it's no longer a fit, you're not doing yourself a favor. You're not doing that person a favor by allowing them to stay in a position, in a seat, in a role where you no longer see a future for them. They just don't know it yet.
Yeah, I think, early on for us, we waited way too long to have difficult conversations or we weren't as clear.
Yeah.
Right. So we've gotten a lot better at really embracing difficult conversations. And this is something we work with our leaders because I think difficult conversations in general is something a lot of people, they're either too aggressive or too passive with it in most cases. Like it's an art to be in the middle. And so
Absolutely.
yeah. So a lot of times what you'll see is there'll be an incident that happens, right? Some sort of cultural thing or performance, a behavioral thing. And sometimes behavioral things are what make it even more difficult because it's not like you, I don't know, didn't hit a metric or you violated this. Like there's a lot of gray in there. And so you'll see things like sometimes leaders will just send out an email to everybody. Hey, I just want to remind everybody about XYZ, right? Or we need to do this instead of addressing it directly with the person. And so for us, I think we learned that if we're hearing things, it's actually worse than it looks, right? Because for the most part, team members, I think, are very gracious with each other. I mean, you can have some drama and you have to, kick that in the butt. But I think for the most part, team members are gracious. And so typically by the time you're getting wind of it, it's been going on for a bit. And then just don't avoid those difficult conversations. You have to address them directly. And then if you want to be like, hey, we've had a conversation, you can address it, but just go to the source. You have to be very clear. You got to nip it. You got to nip
Direct
it quick.
source.
Yeah.
Yeah. It goes back to the curiosity again that I talked about earlier. But when you approach a difficult conversation curious, it is very disarming. So you can say, "Hey, like, tell me what happened here. I saw this happen. Like, is everything okay, or what's going on? Like, you're not typically like this. Hopefully, if that's the case, like, I don't usually see this behavior. Like, tell me what's going on. Like, what happened." And you can ask different questions, but you're not just aggressively like smacking somebody across the head and say like, "Hey, dummy, don't do that again." Like you're caring about these people. We call it 3C communication in our organization as part of our leadership academy, but it's being clear, it's being caring, and it's also being challenging. So if someone leaves a conversation feeling like you cared about them, you were clear, and then you give them a challenge, like I believe in you, like I know that we can do this. Here's the behavior I want to see, or here's the goal we're setting out before you. That shifts all of the antagonistic communication around, "I'm your boss and I'm babysitting you." Like, no, I care about you. Here's how we do this inside of our organization. Do you still see this as a good fit? And obviously you're not going to ask that every conversation, depending on the level of where it is. But it's just approaching it with curiosity. And man, to be unclear is to be unkind. So the clearer we are as leaders, whether it's vision, values, difficult conversations, again, we keep too much in our head.
Yeah.
So whether it's systems, processes, or people issues, it gets messy. Nobody loves having difficult conversations, but when we're dealing with people, it's part of the gig.
Yeah. And I think we need to assume the best. That's something we'll tell our leaders a lot too, right? I think sometimes you can get defensive because there's a lot of ownership in what you're doing. And so assuming the best. So not assuming that whatever the situation was out of malice or whatever. Normally that's not the case, right? So when you approach it being curious, like Wes was saying, that helps disarm on both ends to really understand the root of it. And I'll give just a quick example. I had two individuals, they do our scheduling. So they're on the phones and they were both interested in a leadership position. But I didn't really feel like they were ready yet. So I opened up an internship position for 3 months where they would take on some special projects and kind of see how they did and how they felt. Well, one of those projects was their leader was going to be out for a week at a conference. And so he was going to be the first point of contact. He was going to be making the calls that week. And so I come back and I'm checking with him as part of this internship. And I was like, how was the week? And he was like, it was great. It went really well. I think I answered everything, the way I should. And Krista, his supervisor, said that, yep, she would have done the same thing. So it went good. And he goes, but if I'm being honest, I kind of feel like the team had a little bit of this attitude of like, the boss is the way, we're going to play. And I was like, well, tell me more. Why did you feel that way? And he was like, I just didn't feel like they cared as much. And I said, well, let's look at some of the data. And so we looked at the data and the data wasn't showing that, right? They were just as busy. They had answered just about as many calls. The quality was there. And this was a real teachable moment, right? I said, maybe they were, maybe that was happening. But what I think happened was you guys were both here. Your level of weight and ownership increased. And what you felt now was the difference between doing the job and owning the overall success of that department. And that was the gap. It wasn't that they lowered, it was that you increased and now you saw the difference in between. And so you can see where from his perspective, his first thought was, they didn't care. They weren't working as hard. They weren't. But in reality, the data said, no, they did just about what they normally do. Your ownership went so high that you want everything to go so great that what you saw was that gap now. Not necessarily their performance, but your ownership increased. And so you can see as a new leader, though, going in, you can have those experiences where now all of a sudden all the weight's on your shoulders, the decisions, and people below you can feel like they don't care as much. And there's to a certain extent, they don't carry the same weight. So the care is different. But it wasn't really a performance issue. And so I think as leaders, we have to check. And that's where having those conversations, looking at data, making data-driven decisions. I know people feel like that can be a little heartless, but like that's a case where the data actually helped the people interaction because it wasn't based on my emotion. There was data to then support or rationalize, what it was I was or was not feeling.
Yeah. That's a great example. And I love that you circled back to this curiosity thing. I find it to be so crucial. I mean, it's absolutely crucial that this has happened to me within the last couple of weeks where there was an issue that something wasn't getting done in the way that I had thought we'd agreed on with me and someone that I'm, in leadership with. And our minds fill in the blanks real quickly without even trying to. And so, but thankfully, I'm thankful I got to intersect it now and not like, a decade or two ago when I would have definitely approached it differently. And so really all I did was just mostly ask questions. And then come to find out 2/3 of what the issue is there was literally a tech issue. So something wasn't displaying. I couldn't see work that they had done because of a tech issue that wasn't even their fault.
Yeah.
And so then it's like, well, okay, then there was only like 1/3 of maybe the issue. And then questions for that also kind of just surfaced what was really going on. And was it what I would have guessed? No, of course it wasn't. Because only they know what's going on with them. And I think that can be,
right.
It's not I think it doesn't come naturally for a lot of us that to start with curiosity. It's a learned skill.
And younger Kristy, younger Nate, younger Wes, we probably would have had how many nights where we were thinking about it, getting frustrated, getting irritated, being a little passive aggressive, whatever it is that, before you learn some of these skills. But, you carry way more weight until you learn, like you said, just to be curious and ask those questions. And like I said, assume the best. I feel like it's normally not as bad. Normally we think we're not as clear as we think we are a lot of times too, right? Like we're like, I feel like I was really clear, but then you realize, okay, like I need to put it in writing. I need to make sure they understand. One of the things I had to start doing, Nate, was I would say, okay, teach this back to me as if you had to like summarize this for another person, right? Because what I found was when I was working with new team members or leaders, I would be like, all right, here's this, blah, blah, blah. Do you get it? And they're like, yes. Because one, they do think they get it. A lot of times when we see something, we feel like we're following along and we're like, okay, that doesn't look so hard. Two, they don't want to let me down. They don't want to make it seem like they don't know. And so they say yes, and then they walk away and things don't get done or it doesn't get done the same way I thought it was. and you realize that they heard you, but they didn't really understand.
Yeah.
And so I had to get better at as a leader, especially when it was like a new project or a new initiative, even if they seem like they understood, being like, all right, show me,
yeah.
let's do one together. I want you to do it. Let's walk through it. Cause I wanted to make sure that they really got it. Because that's where I would find a lot of that frustration is like, okay, we had the conversation. We talked about it. You said you knew it. You got it. And then what you did, something happened, right? And it was just in that really understanding.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing when you were talking about that issue, Nate, that we lead a full person. Like we're not just leading, like if I worked for you, you're not just leading Wes the employee, you're leading Wes the human. And that can be a hard line to walk as a leader because we're not responsible for their full life, but we also are there to support them. Like we're not their counselor, but we also can counsel them in some situations or help to provide resources. So it's that interesting line where we do provide certain resources. Like we have a health and wellness coach that we contract with that our team members get some free calls with. We have some coaching and some different things that happen. We have some industry specific resources that we can provide. But we want to give them our team all the tools and resources available so that they can have a good place to work, so they can have opportunity. But they're the ones that have to take advantage of it. But if we don't ask the questions, and almost every time, and Nate, I'm curious, you probably found this to be true, but in our company, like almost every time there's a performance issue, something's going on in their personal life. And that's where the two worlds kind of collide. When you're like, hey, what's going on? It's almost always, oh, my kid is having this issue, or me and my husband are doing this, or we're struggling here, we're not getting along, whatever the thing is. But it almost always goes back to a personal issue. So then being able to have 3C communication through that helps them feel better about their work, helps them feel better about their life, actually makes them feel like that they work for a place that cares about them, that's willing to talk about it. And you do have to be careful with the lines. Again, you're not like all in the middle of everything, but just being a sounding board for somebody to be able to ask them some questions or for them to be able to talk it out. I mean, probably the best counseling session that you can ever have is one where someone's just listening. And I think as leaders, like we discount the power of asking a question and then not talking, and then actually letting somebody else talk, and we just listen. And they walk away feeling like this is the best conversation I ever had. And like, well, I just listened to you the whole time. But that they will leave that way if we actually take the time to ask the questions, to be like, is everything okay? And you don't have to say, is everything okay in your personal life? Just asking the question, is everything okay? Opens that up.
Yeah.
So it's just, I know for us, it's been, cause earlier it was like, oh, like keep that at home, come to work and work. And yeah, we do still teach that when you're at work, man, give it your all. When you're at home, give it your all. Like don't answer the emails when you're home, like bring the energy home. And we even talk about, for me, like when I was inspecting more, like having a landmark when I was driving home, like, okay, I'm starting to switch out of work mode and switch into family mode. I want to walk in with energy, with a smile. I don't want to be beaten down, walking through the doors like, oh, dad's home again. Dad, watch out. Like he's coming home from work. Like I don't want that to be the experience for my family. I don't want that to be the experience of our team when they come home. So now it's gray. It's people, it's work, it's life, and you do your best to manage it. And like it is their life and it is our business, but their life is a part of the business. So again, like they're still responsible for their life, but we want to be a resource where we can, a support where we can, and help them be the best they can be at home and at work.
Yeah, 100%. I'm 100% with you on this. Okay, last question. We're going to land the plane with this. It's 10 or 20 years from now, one of your former employees is leading an organization of their own. What's the lesson, if you had to pick one, that you hope they learned while working with you?
The first word that came to my mind was just margin. When you're growing a business, like you can have growth or you can have comfort. You can't have both. You can have growth or you can have control. You can't have both. You're only going to get to a certain place if you have a lot of control inside the business. So why I thought of margin is like as entrepreneurs, as leaders, like most of us have a pretty high level of driver in us. Like we are like, hey, nothing moves unless it's pushed. Like I'm going to shove things around. I'm going to make it happen. Get out of the way. Like, and that was one of my downfalls at times as a leader. In the book Multipliers, it talks about an accidental diminisher type is the pace setter. And I can't be a pace setter. Like I set the pace, and the unspoken rule is you got to keep up. So I have to be aware of that in how I show up to our team. But margin in is so powerful because you need space, and you need that time where you can step away from work, from whatever it is, and you just have margin just to be.
Mhm.
Zig Ziglar taught years ago. This is the first person I ever heard say it, but be, do, have. And we focus so much in our country, so much in the work culture as just doing, and we do to have, but we lose sight of being still, of having peace. And peace and comfort are different. You can be very uncomfortable and still have peace. So I'm not talking about losing your peace, but I am talking about if you're getting really comfortable, you're probably not the place you want to be. You probably need to challenge yourself. You probably need to like stretch yourself in some area. But margin is just huge. That's why we do a lot of what we do. That's why we take the vacations. That's why we are always pushing that, because all of us start out as an entrepreneurs wanting freedom, and the business eats the life of the entrepreneur. And now we quit the 9 to 5 to work 40 hours to work 100 hours. Or you're stepping up in the leadership, you're doing this for XYZ, and now you're working more, you're stressed out more. And if you don't have that space, if you don't create the margin, you can't read a page without margin. It's just all ink. Your life makes no sense if you have no margin. So you need to build in that margin, and you need to build what you want. You need to build what you actually set out to build. And that's just huge. So I hope they would take that away of saying that, yeah, I'm building this, but my life is better because I built it, not that I sacrificed my life to build it.
Yeah, I
Awesome.
agree with Wes on that one. And the only thing I would really add to it, kind of one of the statements that my team will often kind of make fun of me for saying often is, what would it take? And I think that just goes for anything in life. It's a lot easier for us to focus on the things we can't control or the reasons why it's not doable. And so as they're building their business or as they're designing, their life and their dream, to be thinking about not necessarily all the barriers, but what would it take? And really just broadening your thoughts. And then I think there's so much, a lot of times our frustration comes from a lack of control in a situation, right? Like the grass is greener on the other side because we're just thinking about all the things we don't have. And so when we ask ourselves, what would it take? We then can evaluate what it would take, and then we get to choose whether or not we're wanting to do what it takes, right?
Yeah.
And then in that choice is where we can find a lot of freedom, because now I'm choosing not to sacrifice XYZ for this, or I am choosing to do this and sacrifice in this area, but I have that control over that choice. And so what would it take? I feel like if they could gotten to that point in their career or their life or their business, and look back to Wes's point and think, not only because the business really isn't that important in the scheme of life, right? And so we want people to have the businesses or jobs or whatever to support their life, to support, the things that they're passionate about, the calling that they have on their life, the impact that they want to have. That's the important thing. Like we want people to have, on a more personal level, strong marriages and strong families. And so like, if you have a sick kid, the rest of the world doesn't really matter at that point, right? And so sometimes we put so much time and energy and focus on our businesses or our careers, and lose focus of some of the things that are really important. And so I would be so excited for our team member. But to Wes's point, it would be that they did it, they built it, and like their family was strong. They were thriving themselves, and now they are giving back. I think ultimately would be where we'd get the most joy out of seeing that success story.
Wow. Beautiful vision. I love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. Well, guys, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time to just share lessons learned.
Wow. There were a lot of gold nuggets as far as I'm concerned in that conversation. One of them that's sticking with me, and I might not quote it exactly right, but was, until you're replaceable, you're not promotable. Or once you're replaceable, then you're promotable. Either way, you do the positive or the negative, but either way, I think that's profound on so many levels. And I actually want to tie that right into the action move that I give you. Here's an exercise you could try. Start it with yourself, and then you could turn around and do this exercise with everyone on your team, and they could do it with everyone on their teams. But the question would be, or the exercise would be this, would be to write down the 5 or 10 things that you're doing right now that nobody else can do. And from there, kind of like what they were talking about, start to figure out, well, how can we get someone else on the team, or more than one person on the team, right? Like what they were saying, who could be competent in all of those things? Because frankly, that's what good leadership looks like. It is replication. And my hope is that not only do you understand that and get that and run with that, and by all means, you might be doing that better than most already. That's awesome. Then the key is to have everyone on your team also not just understand that up in their minds conceptually, but to be doing the actions where they are replicating, where their list is either a non-existent or exceptionally short, the list of things that only they can do and that no one else on their team can do. How powerful an organization is when there's enough shared ownership and when there's enough, not just delegating of tasks, but empowerment of responsibilities. Well, I'm just getting excited about this. Okay, I better not make this outro too long. But yeah, it's powerful. What they were talking about today is an extremely, extremely powerful principle. And I hope that you just sink your teeth into it and that it thrives in your organization. Now, I have a resource for you that's free. It's a downloadable PDF. It's the 7 quiet danger signs that your supervisors are burning out their staff. How does this relate? Well, what happens a lot of times is that supervisors or even higher level leaders, they were never trained in how to manage people, how to handle conflict and drama, and how do you get the best out of people and not just be riding them whenever they're not performing up to standard or things like that. This resource gets at all of those things with very clear action steps you can take to turn that thing around. You can get your free copy at iddleader.com/burnout. Wow, I'm really pumped. We've got some awesome guests coming up very, very soon. So until next time, here's to you. Keep up the amazing work.